I read a lot of really amazing books in 2025, but I also read some stinkers. I read some books that really did not work for me. I did not like them. I did not have a fun time. I did not walk away thinking, wow, what a great book. The opposite, in fact. So today we're going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2025. We're going to start out with the least bad books and then move towards number one, which is going to be my absolute least favorite book of 2025. Before we get started, I am going to say there are some very popular and beloved books on this list, so if you do not feel emotionally prepared to hear criticism of one of your favorite books, maybe skip past that part or just listen to why these books didn't work for me. It might be interesting for you. I'm not just going to say, oh, this is a shitty book and move on. I'm going to explain why I personally did not like it. Alright, coming in at number 7 at 2.5 stars, we have A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. This one was particularly sad for me because I have given 7 Days in June by this author 5 stars. I really loved it. And this book is similar in that it's well written and it has a really great premise, but what didn't work for me was really the love connection in this one. So this is a romance book that has a speculative element. So the description says that leap years are an enchanting time. We have our main character. Her name is Ricky Wilde, and she comes from this really rich and successful business family, and she really doesn't fit in. She meets this old woman one day who invites her to come to Harlem and I think live in one of her properties or something like that. So Ricky kind of upends her life and goes to Harlem. And Harlem, of course, has a rich history in the arts and black culture. I really did like that aspect of it, that aspect of exploring Harlem, and there's a lot about music and art. And one night in February, she meets this man, this mysterious man who seems to have something different going on with them. And then we also have elements of seeing this man's past during the Harlem Renaissance. So the synopsis doesn't actually say what this speculative element is. And so me as the reader, I had an idea in my head of what it was going to be, and it was not that. And I loved the Harlem Renaissance aspects of this story. I liked the writing, I liked the characters, but what I really did not like was the pacing and I guess everything about their romance. I was so frustrated when I realized what the speculative element was and what it wasn't, and how I thought that it was going to explain this kind of insta-love situation and make all of that very much understandable and clear, but it didn't. And so I was left just being annoyed that these people had fallen in love so quickly, and it was like pitched to us that they had this incredible magical connection, and I just disagreed. I just didn't think it was that magical or wonderful. I think romances with a speculative element can be really hit or miss for people, and especially for me, so I just left this one not really liking it. Honestly, I would have loved just a historical romance set during the Harlem Renaissance from Tia Williams instead of this like mix of modern and then these like flashbacks. So yeah, 2.5 stars, not the worst rating in the world. This is the least offensive offender on this list, but still a very disappointing read for me. Coming in at number 6, we have a book that I think is going to be on a lot of people's bests and worst lists. After I film this video and post it, I need to go watch more people's lists to see where this book falls. But this is Great Big Beautiful Life, GBBL by Emily Henry. Emily Henry said that she was doing things a little differently with this book, and I can see now what she was talking about. So this book really has quite a strong subplot of learning about this heiress and her history and her past. So I would say like almost half of this book is taken up by a storyline that has really nothing to do with our two main characters. So we have Alice and Hayden, and they are both writers, and they are both given this like 1-month trial period to write the story of this heiress, Margaret Ives, who's now an old woman in her 80s or something like that, and she is from some sort of business dynasty back in the olden days. You know, she was very rich, going out and partying, meeting celebrities, and so we are seeing chapters that are just about this woman's family and her own life, and then we are also seeing Alice and Hayden together in this small town as they are having meetings with this woman, Margaret. and Alice and Hayden are of course falling in love while they are writing this story. I am an Emily Henry lover, okay? I have given all of her books 4 stars and up. I have several 5-star books from her. I consider Beach Read to be one of my absolute top faves of all time in the romance genre. So there was really no part of me that went into this book expecting to be disappointing, expecting to dislike it. I knew that it might not be my new fave. I knew that it might not get a full 5 stars, but I did not really imagine a world in which I had more negatives than positives. Like A Love Song for Ricky Wilde, I gave this one 2.5 stars. I was very disappointed with it. I do think this one is significantly worse than A Love Song for Ricky Wilde in terms of the romance dynamic and my overall feelings, but I will say Emily Henry is still Emily Henry in this book. I still really enjoyed the writing. What I didn't enjoy was pretty much everything else. So the main problem with this book is twofold. One, it is extremely similar to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it is not nearly as good. And 2 is that this woman, Margaret, is uninteresting. There is nothing about her that merits this level of, we need to learn about her family, we need to learn about her life, we need to learn about her personal problems and her romance. Like, literally, she is just a woman who grew up in a wealthy family, and at one point she has like a famous boyfriend. Nothing about her is remarkable. Nothing about her is interesting. Nothing about her is noteworthy. I think the only reason that this story is being hyped so much is that she has been in hiding for a long time. She hasn't been out in the public. The tabloids haven't been able to get any photos of her. And like that I get. Like, we as a society reward people for being part of rich families and not really having any talent. I mean, look at their Kardashians, right? There's nothing particularly interesting about them. They're just very wealthy. But this is a book that we're reading by an author who could very intentionally have written someone more remarkable and didn't. So that is really the main problem. I had no problem being taken away from the romance for a while and reading about, you know, this topic. I thought I was gonna love that. The problem really is just that she sucks. Yeah. And then Alice and Hayden, I didn't hate their romance. I just didn't have enough of it. The first kind of like physically romantic inklings that we got in this book, I was shocked at how early it was and how little interaction they had had. I was like, whoa, what is happening? So I think the pacing was just really off because Emily Henry had to do this story and this romance in the same book. It did not work. And then the worst offense of all, I think, that just like pissed me off is that there is a twist in this book that is like the exact same twist in The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I'm sorry if that spoils this book for you, but like, is that a spoiler? I don't know. There's a very similar twist, okay? And I think that's vague enough that you don't know. But not a good romance book in my opinion. Very disappointing from Emily Henry. All right, coming in at number 5, I think all of these now are 2 stars, and then the last 2 are going to be 1 star. I originally gave this book 2.5 stars. I think looking back, it is a 2. This is a very popular book. I have seen this on multiple people's best of Instagram posts, so I'm going to try to explain why I really didn't like it. And that is The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hashem. This is a romantasy book. It said that it was Egyptian inspired, so I was extremely excited. Sounds like the perfect book for me. The thing about romantasy that I struggle with so much is that what I want is an excellent fantasy book and plot that has a really strong romance. And usually what I get is a very mediocre fantasy world and plot with a strong romance. That's not what I want. If I just want romance, I will read a contemporary romance or a historical romance. I want both. So when I love a fantasy romance, I love it, okay? Because my top 2 genres are fantasy and romance. But this did not work for me. So The premise is we have this kingdom of Jasad that was burned like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And all of the people of this Jasadi kingdom had like special magical qualities to them. We have this kind of colonial power called Nizal, and they are still hunting down Jasadis. And so obviously if you are Jasadi and you have magic, you have to hide that. And our main character, Sylvia, is Jasadi. She does have magic, but not only is she Jasadi, she is the Jasad heir, hence the title. And one day, the heir of Nizal, whose name is Erin, comes to her village where she's been hiding. And there is kind of an altercation that leads her to use her magic in a moment of like trying to save someone or save herself, something like that, where it's a split-second decision and she uses her magic and he sees. Instead of just taking her away to be imprisoned or executed, or most likely imprisoned and then executed, he realizes that he can use her to catch some like rebels, some kind of rebel group of Jasadis or something like that. So they make a deal. Obviously she doesn't want to be imprisoned and or executed. They make a deal. And that is what we were following in this book, is them working together in such a way that Sylvia can try to save herself, but also is she going to betray him? Like, how is she going to, you know, juggle this situation that she's found herself in? So they're very much enemies. His kingdom literally razed her kingdom to the ground. So obviously there is a level of hatred and resentment that should be there. There's something about gods, I think, I don't remember. This had so little fantasy world building, I was shocked. When I heard Egyptian inspired, I was expecting like lush, intricate, wonderful fantasy world building. This did not have that in my opinion. Yeah. And then the fantasy plot of like her working with him, I don't want to spoil it, but it's very boring. We are basically waiting for something to happen. She's kind of training for something, and I found it very boring. And I also found that there was so little romance in this, and I think rightfully so, right? These people are enemies. These people are on opposite sides. I mean, kind of crazy that she would ever fall in love with this man in the first place. There's so little romance in here. There is maybe one actually romantic exchange between these people in this whole book. And, you know, theoretically, I like a slow burn like that, especially when we have this intense fantasy plot. But because I found the fantasy world building so mediocre and so lacking, all I had was this romance, which was almost non-existent. And also the plot of them working together was boring, in my opinion. So I was just bored. I'm so sad about this. This had so much potential. I definitely need to find more Egyptian inspired fantasy books, especially by Egyptian authors, and fall in love with them. I know Sarah El Arifi has a Cleopatra book coming out soon that I'm definitely going to be reading, but huge disappointment. I was bored to tears. I did not think this was good. I'm so sorry if this is your favorite book, but yeah. Alright, coming in at number 4, we have another contemporary romance, and that is The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. This was a 2-star book. I unfortunately didn't like this. This was my first Casey McQuiston, and it was also a little buddy read with my friends. We actually had like weekly FaceTimes to talk about this book, which was so fun, and none of us really liked it all that much, but I had the harshest opinion. So this book is pitched as 2 bisexual exes end up on the same food and wine tour through Europe. They challenge each other to a hookup competition to prove that they're over each other, and they are obviously not over each other. So we are watching them fall in love, I guess, again on this trip, on this food and wine tour. And then we do get some flashbacks of like what happened between them, what's going on with them in the past. The first thing that was a red flag for me was the really pretentious food and wine writing. I will say, despite not liking this book, I did come out of it thinking that Casey is a very talented author, very talented writer, and I do want to read more from them. So I think it was the case of like wrong book, but could be right author. The first half of this book is entirely in Theo's perspective, and then I believe the second half is in Kit's perspective, and I didn't really love Theo. I thought that they were kind of a mess and not super pleasant to read about. Not the worst character ever, and I do think that like chaotic, messy characters have a place in literature for sure, but I can't lie and say that I enjoyed it in this book specifically. And then also just the issue of these people already fell in love. These people already made their connection. These people already had their meet cute and their first kiss and their first, you know, whatever. And so we don't get to see that. It's them reconnecting, and I just found that a lot less fun. Sorry. I just didn't really like it. I was appreciating the writing style, and I think Casey had some interesting things to say about gender and sexuality. Clearly they are very educated about food and wine, and that's cool. They're a very smart person, but yeah, as a romance book, I did not enjoy this. I just wanted it to be over, and it was quite long as well. So 2 stars. I'm so sorry, Casey. Coming in at number 3, we have another fantasy romance that people love, that are on people's best lists. I mean, this book is a bit older, so I don't think that it's on people's list this year. But it is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is a book that I challenged myself to read last year because I really wanted to see if romantasy was a genre that I can like, and clearly the answer was no, at least for this book. So the basic fantasy premise setup is that we have this mortal world that has been colonized by the gods, and currently it is being ruled by the Descended, which are the descendants of the gods. Get it? Okay. So they're kind of like fae. You know, they're beautiful, they're more powerful, they're taller, I think, you know, very common premise, right? And then we have our main character, DM, who's just a regular girl. She is a healer. Her mother goes missing, and she, as a healer, kind of responds to this emergency with some of the Descended, like, royal kids. And these 2 events kind of lead her to get involved in the world of these Descended. The love interest is, of course, one of these Descended. What even is the plot? I don't know. I guess she's looking for answers about things, and she's working as a healer and kind of getting involved in this rebellion. I guess that's the basic setup. This is another one where I felt like the fantasy world building was just so scarce. Like, there was hardly any of it. It was just like ChatGPT comes up with a popular fantasy premise. That is so mean. It is not as bad as if ChatGPT were to come up with a fantasy premise. But like, for me, as someone who loves high fantasy books, the fantasy was just so blah, meh, you know? And then the romance dynamic was boring. I will say that I was thinking about giving this book 1 star throughout a lot of it because I was so fucking bored. And I think the last, like, I don't know, 50, 70 pages or so did pick up, and I did appreciate the, like, very ending. So that's what moved it from, like, a 1 star territory to a 2 star territory. I'm sure there are people who will say, oh my god, like, books 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and whatever are so much better than book 1. I believe you. I just don't care enough to read the sequels. I didn't go into this book wanting to hate it. I really wanted to like it. I really wanted to have a fun fantasy, tense, steamy time. I just didn't. Yeah, bored to tears for most of it. Alright, this next book, this is our first 1 star. I did not initially give this book 1 star, but then when I was making this list and thinking about all the thoughts I had about all these books, I was like, this is definitely a 1 star book. I cannot describe to you what this book is pitched as without just reading the fucking synopsis. So that's what I'm gonna do. The book is called A Land So Wide by Erin A. Craig. I'm gonna read it to you, and then I'm gonna tell you what I hated, okay? I won't read like the whole thing because it's really fucking long. Like everyone else in the settlement of Mistaken, Greer Mackenzie is trapped. Founded by an ambitious lumber merchant, the village is blessed with rich natural resources that has made its people prosperous, but at a cost. The same woods that have lined the townsfolk's pockets harbor dangerous beasts, wolves, bears, and the bright-eyeds, monsters beyond description who have rained utter destruction down on nearby settlements. But Mistaken's founders made a deal with the mysterious benevolence. The warding stones that surrounded the town will keep the bright-eyeds out and the town's citizens in. Anyone who spends a night within Mistaken's borders belongs to it forever. So basically, you stay in the town. These warding stones keep out the monsters. I believe you can go out beyond them like during the day, but at night is when they are like active, so you cannot leave at night. And our main character, Greer, sees her boyfriend, Ellis, fleeing monsters one day. He has like left the town. He is in danger and she goes after him. And that is really what sets off the events of the book. That does not happen for a long time though. And this book is so strangely written because I thought that maybe this book took place in the 40s, the 50s maybe. And then I think we have a flashback chapter at some point, like at the beginning of the book. I think this book takes place in like the 1700s or something, which is crazy. Like 1800s the latest, and the author makes absolutely no effort to establish that historical time period and make you feel like you are in the far past. So red flag number one. Red flag number two, our character Greer is in her 20s and she acts like a child. Already hate. Number three, I went into this expecting that there was going to be some sort of romantic element, and then we start this book and she already has a boyfriend, so I'm like, okay. And then I won't spoil what happens in this book, but I hated everything about the ending, about where this book went, about the romantic plotline. Hated it. So stupid. Yeah, I just thought the plot was stupid. I thought the town was stupid. Just thought that everything was stupid. I'm so sorry to this author. I'm sure that, you know, it takes a lot of talent to write a book. I know that. Just for me as a reader, I was sitting there and just thinking, this is so stupid. It's like worse than boredom, right? Like I was bored, but I was also thinking actively, this is dumb. This is stupid. I don't like this. Why did she choose this point? This book is also pitched as being a retelling of some Scottish folklore. I personally am not familiar with the myth or the folklore that this is based on. I have no idea what it's called or anything like that, but if you go into this expecting any sort of Scottish folklore vibes, you will not get that. I think I've heard somebody say that this is really similar to a movie called like The Village or something, and I think I read the description and it was like super similar in terms of the premise. So maybe just go watch that movie. I just hated everything about this. I hated the choices, I hated the character writing, I hated the writing, I hated the plot points. I'm so sorry. This just did not work for me as a reader. The only reason that I finished this was because I used one of my Libro FM credits on it. So that's the only audiobook I got to buy that month, and I was gonna finish it if it killed me. And it almost did kill me. Alright, my number one least favorite book of the year. The only book that I truly am perplexed and gobsmacked that I hated this so much because it is such a beloved book. It is in fact a classic. And obviously, right, my opinion doesn't do anything to take this book down a notch or remove it from the canon or remove it from the hearts of people who have loved this, right? This has an introduction by Guillermo del Toro, who is a famous, beloved horror director. And I feel like past me would always kind of bump up my rating for a classic because it's like, well, if everyone else loves this, obviously, like, there's something wrong with me. But I think it's okay to just say, I didn't get this book, here's what I thought of it. If you like it, that's great. I didn't, and just explain. So that's what we're gonna do. Don't hate me, but it is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I don't know how many haunted house stories like this existed before this book. Obviously, Shirley Jackson did not invent the horror genre, But in terms of like a group of people going to a house to study and observe paranormal activity, I don't know how many existed before that. So she might have been the first. And in that case, like, yeah, that's awesome that you came up with that. Me, as someone who was born in the late 90s, I have come across things like that dozens and dozens of times. So I'm not going to go into this being like, oh my God, what a brilliant concept, right? We have a guy, I think he's a scientist or a doctor or something like that, who really wants to go into this house that has been rumored to have ghosts or paranormal activity in it. And he wants other people there with him for some reason, or maybe he wants to study the effects on them, I don't remember, but he puts an ad in the newspaper, and there are a few people who reach out and take the bait and come with him to this house. So we have, I think our main character's name is Eleanor, and we're watching her interact with these few other people who come to this house, and they're in this house. A few paranormal things happen. They have a lot of conversations. As the book goes on, there is this uneasiness that Shirley Jackson manages to put into the book. But for me, it was just the fact that the writing, the dialogue was becoming nonsensical and pointless and stupid. And that to me does not a good horror book make, okay? This was incredibly boring. I mean, truly, I think it takes talent to make a haunted house book this fucking boring. Okay. When I went back after reading the novel to the commentary on this in the front of the book and read what it had to say about Eleanor and loneliness and all of these things, I was like, that is the biggest stretch I have ever read in like a literary context of like, here's the text, here's what I got out of the text. What a stretch. What an Olympic sport of close reading to get from A to B, okay? And maybe you can say that I just suck and I couldn't do it, but wow. Wow, to give me so little and expect me to love this book because of what it has to say about the human condition or whatever, like, no. I found this so boring. I hated reading these pointless, stupid conversations for 100+ pages, and these characters were so flat to me, so uninteresting, so irrelevant. I just did not care. Shirley Jackson did not make me care about these people. The house thing really wasn't entertaining, interesting, frightening, scary, creative, imaginative at all to me. I was actually shocked at how little the house actually did. So I'm so sorry to people who love this book. I will say I'm not a horror reader. You'll notice there are no horror books on my best of list, nowhere even close. I have given some horror books 4 and 5 stars in the past, but overall I'm really not a horror reader. So we were already at a disadvantage going into this book, right? But I hoped that since it was a classic, I would love it, and I just didn't. I would love to hear from you if you love this book, why you love it. Totally open to, telling me what is great about this book that I didn't see. I would love to hear that. But this was the worst reading experience I had this year. I was reading this for a vlog, otherwise I would have DNF'd so hard. Alright, those are all of my worst books. Let me know some of your worst books, or let me know your thoughts on any of these. I would love to hear, even if they are opposite of mine. I love book reviews. I love talking about books, hearing people's thoughts. So no hate to any of these authors, obviously. Writing a book is really, really hard, and I admire anyone who does it. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely week.